1st tariff deadline has arrived. U.S. President Donald Trump had already hit a pause on the tariff several times since the first. It was first announced in April 2nd, Liberation Day. And following the signing of a July 31st executive order, America's reciprocal tariff system was modified. Countries which had a trade deficit with the U.S. will now face a default 15% duty on all goods entering American borders, while nations with a U.S. trade surplus will pay about 10% tariffs, specifically 10% tariffs. Most of the announced tariffs will not go into effect until August 7th, except for tariffs on Canada, which take effect on August 1st. The White House said the delay will, of course, give Customs and Border Protections time to adjust to the environment. We do have Okwedeji Okpakunle, Senior Commodity Market Analyst, Concierge Consulting. It's great to have you in.
Good morning.
Yes.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining us on such short notice. But let's get into it. Any real winners, right? We have reached the deadline. It has elapsed. Any real winners in this? Any silver lining from this trade tariff, that has been implemented?
So I will say that in what we always refer to as a trade war, there are no real winners. It's a question of negotiation, who bites what and who lets go of what. And if you want to analyze this properly, you need to go to the background. The background is, how does the American economy work? It's based on a tribe. The first is a strong dollar. America has control of that, so there's a strong dollar. The second is that you have cheap energy. America is dependent on energy, even though they are currently the biggest energy producer in the world in terms of crude oil. But they are still their price discovery in national markets, and most of their oil from fracking. And so essentially that means that they want to keep oil between $40 to $50 effectively. And the range for fracking cost of production per barrel is between $30 and $90 per barrel. And the third is cheap goods from China. Now, I ended with the third because China is the manufacturing powerhouse of the world. And so if you're going to apply tariffs to a manufacturing powerhouse like China or commodity-rich countries around the world which export to the US, essentially you are saying that the dollar might become weak. Donald Trump effectively has said he wants a weaker dollar so they are more competitive, because over the decades they've been screaming at China that China is manipulating their currency. But now Donald Trump, who's a capitalist through and through, is now on the driver's seat and is saying, we will get a cheaper dollar. I will make sure that oil is maintained cheap, between $40, $50.
Looks like we're having some network disruptions there, but hopefully we are able to get him, back on this conversation. And from what has been said so far, it does seem like Trump did hold a lot of the cards, and questions will remain on whether or not this is a fair trade. We have seen quite a number of negotiations being made. Some trade deals have been struck, and there will be questions as regards whether negotiations, and most likely negotiations, will continue beyond today, and who knows, perhaps till the end of Trump's administration. He is the businessman himself. Hopefully we are able to get Okwe back in for this conversation. All right, Okwe, great to have you back. You were making quite some solid points then. If there's one thing I did pick up, it did sound like Trump and the US perhaps held most of the cards with this negotiation. So looking at those who have struck deals or negotiated, their way out of the heavy tariffs that were imposed on them before now, we see that a lot of the deals and negotiations that were made were mostly with European and Asian countries. I'm trying to find a country outside of those two continents that came up with some sort of agreement. What does this indicate about US's foreign policy, or the nations themselves? Even South Africa, they're facing 30% tariffs. That conversation didn't go quite well. So let us into those that were able to see negotiations through predominantly Asian and European countries?
I would say that to a large degree, Donald Trump likes to negotiate from a position of power, and he has shown that over and over again, start high and end low, or end at an equitable position. And that essentially means that if you do not have bargaining power, you lose out of such a negotiation. I will say that South America, which is sending coffee up north to the United States, and you have countries like the Asian nations who are rising rapidly in terms of their developmental indices, also sending technology, particularly South Korea, with Samsung and the likes. They have their shell bills who produce a lot of output for the US. And then you look at South Africa, where you're talking about a mix of some tech and a lot of agriculture. All of this are going to be impacted, but at the end of the day, the real loser is the American consumer. Products or prices, asset prices essentially become more expensive. But for these countries, the downside for them is if they do not come to a deal, they export less to the US. An equitable deal for both parties, I would say. We have seen that countries like South Korea have come out with more favorable outcomes for within their negotiations with the US, and now companies like Samsung are happy or happier than they were when the tariffs were declared. I think they put the benchmark to about 15%. We also have other countries that are coming out with seemingly similar deals. And so we always say, they said they coined this term tackle that to apply to Trump negotiation tactics. And so if you look deep enough, like South Korea has done, like Vietnam has done, essentially it's making sure that you don't have shadow companies from China pushing goods to the US, you're likely to come out on top, and we've seen that with Korea.
Yeah, and it was interesting to hear you say that the real losers here are the US consumers. But as we tie things together, we know that investments across board, right, world over, capital markets, equities, were stalled. Investors were sort of handicapped because of the uncertainty as a result of these tariffs. Would you say, with the somewhat conclusion and the the deadline elapsing, would you say that investors can now go ahead with their investment with a lot more certainty? Has anything changed for investors? Are they able to make more informed decisions?
Well, this is a tough category. I mean, on the one hand, you have investors who would come out on top, and that is going to be with a whiff of luck. And then you're going to have investors who are going to come out with losses. And I'm going to analyze this or explain this with copper. About a few weeks ago, Donald Trump declared that there's going to be a 50% tariff on copper.
All right.
Copper costs about $18 billion to set up a mine. There's been no new mine in the US for the past 20 years. The tariff was expected, and so copper anodes that were all over the world from Chile were redirected to the US in hopes that they get to the US ports, especially in Florida, before today. Unfortunately, a lot of that copper has come in now, and the tariffs
30 seconds, please. 30 seconds because of our time, very briefly.
Oh, yeah. And copper has dropped now 20% in the past 24 hours. And that has translated into billions of dollars for people like Glencore and Trafigura, who export a lot of copper to the US. So that's an example of those who lose. There are some who have gained from trades like gold, on the other hand.
All right. So there's a shift for investors with this move. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm sure this is a developing story. It's not over yet. Okwedeji Okpakunle, Senior Commodity Market Analyst at Kano Sedge Consulting. A pleasure to have you in this morning.
Thank you. Nice to have you as well.